Okay, this one is a bit of an historical artifact. It has a date on it that I got of 4th of February 1976, but I think this is not quite that early. I think because they're talking about this is the Tom Snyder Tomorrow Show. Apparently, this is back when NBC was still trying to do a theme with the Today Show, Tonight Show, and then tomorrow with actor Johnny Carson. It's like tomorrow because on the East and West, it would air after midnight. So technically, it's tomorrow. And Tom Snyder was a rare bird, and anyone that's since then trying to do this style is just sort of a pale imitation. He was the best at it. But they're talking about leading up to the production of the first movie. Now, I should check, but I'm pretty sure that when they finally were getting to do the movie, it was closer to 70. Well, the movie was in 79. So I think we're talking probably 78. Maybe. Because they're talking about how they got a start date, but they don't have a script yet. Let that joke play out when we get in there. But we got DeForest Kelley, James Doohan, Walter Koenig, Harlan Ellison, and Al Schuster, who was guy behind the earlier Star Trek conventions, and they talk, and it's very rollicking discussion, especially when Harlan shows up. But Tom Snyder was, one of a kind, and it's like when he retired, and the Late Show turned into just a carry on from the Late Show. It's like we lost something there. And even Harlan himself, he was a frequent guest of Tom's. He said, you're stepping out, and we're losing it because you were the last of the good ones. But for now, just sit back, relax, fire up the color teeny, and watch the pictures as they fly through the air.
Report on tomorrow with Tom Snyder next.
Good morning, everybody. We conclude our encore presentations for this vacation week for the Tomorrow Show staff, the People team that turns out giant program after giant program. And what a show we have tonight. Not here, but as soon as we finish. Seriously, we have a great show tonight that looks back to the golden days of Star Trek. To this very day, there are hundreds of thousands of people across the country who are not ashamed to call themselves Trekkies, and they actually go to conventions and swap Star Trek memorabilia and stories. And tonight we'll have with us a gentleman who runs some of the Star Trek conventions, Mr. Al Schuster. We'll have Harlan Ellison, who wrote a number of episodes for Star Trek, including some of the best of all time, so say the fans of the original program. Jim Doohan, who was Chief Engineer Scotty on the Starship Enterprise, and DeForest Kelley, who was Dr. Bones McCoy, another member of the original cast. Curiously enough, as this program was waning in popularity, it was canceled by NBC back in the 1960s, but now the reruns of the program on independent stations across the land and around the world are as popular, and in some cases more popular, than they have ever been before. Back with a look at Star Trek after these announcements, and I hope you'll stay with us.
Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission, to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before.
Let me introduce to you now 3 members of the original Star Trek as it appeared on television here on NBC, starting with Mr. DeForest Kelley, who I'm certain you'll recognize as Dr. Bones McCoy. He played the part of Bones McCoy in Star Trek. As such, he was one of the leading characters in this series. He remains today as one of the leading figures among what are called the Trekkies. These are the people that follow the cult of Star Trek. Mr. James Doohan, who was Scotty. Now, here was the man who was the lieutenant commander.
Chief engineer.
Chief engineer. The other night I said the pilot, which was wrong. The man, I was corrected, believe me, by a lot of people. The chief engineer on board the Starship Enterprise, and this man was responsible for making certain that the Enterprise could hit the speed of light times 400 or some such figure.
That's about it when you get right down to warp 5 or 6. But
you have to explain all these warps to me as we go along. And Mr. Walter Koenig, who was known on the series as Chekhov, he was the last member of the cast to be added. He appeared in the series for 2 years, 1967, 1968. Presently, he is a writer. He directs plays and teaches dramatics at the University of California in Los Angeles, UCLA. DeForest, James, and Mr. Koenig, Walter, welcome here. And I didn't say, but I will now, that Gene Roddenberry, who was the creator of Star Trek, had planned to be here tonight, but Gene's got a little case of the flu, and he's at home out in Los Angeles, and I wish he were here. He would like to be here, and I wanted to ask him, as I'll ask all of you, how did this thing get started?
You're speaking of the fan cult?
Not the fan cult.
Phenomena?
Just the show itself. When Star Trek was starting, how did you all get on board the Enterprise?
Well, mine was kind of, I always say I came in the back door. I was not in, there were 2 pilots made, and I was not in either pilot. Roddenberry wanted me, but evidently someone at the network didn't want me. You know how that is.
Oh, yes.
And he kept trying for me, and after he had made the second pilot, he put me in a show called Police Story. And on these reactions where they send the film out for the public to look at, I got lucky and got a kind of a high rating on that sort of thing, and they decided at the last minute to put me in to Star Trek as a doctor. So I started with the series, but I was not in either pilot.
And for myself, I was called one day to read for Star Trek, and because I do a lot of accents, they said, please do a lot of accents. So I read the same lines, about 5 or 6 lines, and I did about 5 different accents, and they picked the Scottish.
You do accents, right.
Yeah, so they picked the Scottish, and of course I was delighted with that, because I think that the tradition of an engineer is a Scotsman, you know, because all the great motor ships and the steamships of the world were built in the Clyde. So we just had to have a Scottish engineer aboard that, you know. But 300 years from now, of course, you had to go back and learn the Scottish accent all over again, because everybody's conversation was exactly the same, and everybody was so boring because of the great communication. Everybody talked the same. So we had to go back, and even Uhura had to learn to speak Swahili. You understand?
Yes. Now, you were the Russian. And that came later, as I said in introducing you, the last 2 years. How come?
Well, let me say first of all that if D came in the back door, I came in the trap door. It was a very fortuitous circumstance where several of the people involved in the production of the show, casting director, and producer, had used me before. I had worked for them in other vehicles. And I was asked to come in and read for a part that had not yet been written. And it was a show called The Cat's Paw, and the character's name was Blake or Smith or Epstein or something like that. In any event, it was a very dramatic moment, a very dramatic scene where I was supposed to say, Captain, the ship is about to blow up, what are we going to do? And I read that with all of that emotion, you know, and all those years of training, experience, my little theater experience, my off-Broadway. And they said, well, that's terrific. But they all kind of looked at their toes, and they finally said, but can you make it funny?
And if you'd have done 21-liners that were dynamite, they would have said, hey, would you make it not quite so funny, please?
Right,
exactly. A little test of versatility there.
You've been around quite a long while, so you know all the ins and outs of this business.
It's a funny thing about auditions. You have to be better for auditions than you ever have to be once you're hired. That is the most critical thing in the world, is getting the job.
Right.
Now, in the little film we played here at the beginning where it said the mission is 5 years to go around the universe, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the show did not last 5 years, did it? It lasted, what, 3?
3 years, 79 performances, which includes pilots, and also the making of a 2-parter, which included the very first pilot, and they wrote a story around it to make a 2-parter, and the only 2-parter we had, and that was called The Menagerie, and it included the first pilot, which was called The Cage, and the second pilot was called Where No Man Has Ever Gone Before.
For actors, was this a good show to work, even though it did not last,
It was a marvelous show.
As long as you wanted it to?
It was a marvelous show. It offered a challenge with each script. It was not unlike, you know, when you go in and do a Western, you have a pretty good idea what you're going to do. But with Star Trek, each script was a challenge. And we could go into almost any different direction. For instance, we did a show called The Deadly Years, which enabled me to age to around 115, 125 years old, which was a real kick for an actor. I spent 5 hours each day in makeup alone for this. Now, you would never get that opportunity anyplace else to do that sort of thing, to be called upon to do that sort of thing. I found it a challenging and interesting show to do.
I thought it was what was particularly challenging about Star Trek for me was trying to make warp 4 Captain into something really exciting, because that's what I had to say most of the time.
Yes. What for, Captain?
No, warp 4. Gee.
Warp 4.
Warp 4.
Tell me about the warps and all that. I must confess to you, I don't understand. I know that
well, the warp 1 is the speed of light.
Okay, and I know that there are people who get this down to the details. They have blueprints of the starship, and they check the technology and everything else. I'm not into it in that fashion, so you'll have to...
Of course, I started the whole
that
thing.
Makes two of
being
us.
the chief engineer, and I built the ship up in space, so at the San Francisco Navy Yards, and they shot it up into space.
What about this thing back here? Is this pretty... No, that isn't close at all, for heaven's sake.
Well, that's not bad. It's not bad, though. You know, pretty good. But, see, we have 1776 on there. Isn't that great? I must say I'm observant.
I thought it was 1976 the first
1701
time I looked at it.
Yeah, it should be 1976.
That's where Scott is located, in that lower compartment there. That's the engine room. And that with the bridge is in the center on top, and then the surrounding area are the science labs and quarters.
And the matter-antimatter pods.
And yes, and the
On
pods.
the outside.
And it took a crew of 450 people, roughly, to operate this.
Yeah. It was about 400,000 tons as it was.
But what was the total cast of the show?
The total cast of the show, as far as the regulars are concerned, I think was 8.
Yeah.
Wasn't it? And,
which means that there were 442 people that we never saw.
They were down in steerage.
Now, you saw them, but they generally died every week. Those are the people we killed off.
To what do you attribute now the fact the thing has not been on the network since 1969?
Yeah.
Right.
And you all do these conventions that we'll speak about a little bit later on. What has kept this popularity alive?
Well, Tom, all you have to do, to me, is to look at a show today. And we can look at them. Some shows I have not seen for 9 years. And you just look at them and you say, man, that was a great show. And not just because you were part of the cast, but because the whole story holds up. The stories had such fantastic content to them.
Good writing?
Absolutely beautiful writing. The whole concept from the start that Gene Roddenberry had, so that he could be able to say something for today, but put it 300 years from now and it wouldn't be censored. You understand? It was really a beautiful thing that you could now look at it and still say to yourself, wow, what a great show, because it had something for every age.
Does the fact that you were Scotty, the engineer of the Starship Enterprise, has that in any way gotten in your way in continuing your career as an actor?
Oh, there's no doubt about it, because I have had producers that I have had worked for before Star Trek, and they'll say to my agent now, well, you know, but I don't want a Scotsman. And I worked for them doing maybe a German or a Frenchman or a Lancashire Englishman or a Welshman or an Irishman. And they say, I don't want a Scotsman, because you become typed. And there's no way that you don't. But I think the whole thing is helping to pay off now by the very fact that we're going to be doing a feature motion picture. You know, and I think that what will probably happen is that they will have another feature motion picture after that, and another one after that. As long as they keep the quality up,
and
then I'm sure we'll all be happy to do it.
And the original cast.
Hopefully. The fans really insist on that.
I would think so.
That's one of the parts of the fact that it is such a great show, is that we were lucky in the casting. You'd be surprised. You know, I have a friend of mine who's a dentist who used to work on the MGM lot, and he fixes the teeth of all the big stars, and he says everything depends on luck in this business. And for 35 years, his anniversary, his name is Charles Cavalieri, and his anniversary of 35th anniversary is this coming Thursday, the 5th of February, and he says it's no way that it isn't luck. He said, you have to have the talent, but he says it's luck that gets you really there.
And you lucked in getting all the cast members.
I think everybody lucked in.
To grow together as a real crew on a real starship,
Absolutely.
which gave something of that reality when the thing was on television. We are blessed by, is it Paramount Pictures, I guess, that's given us permission to show some of the film, and we will do that after these announcements, and I hope all of you will stay with us. John just said one of the questions they're asked a lot is, how come there weren't any bathrooms on the Starship Enterprise? Because they have the blueprints. Give the answers.
Do you want me to answer that?
Oh,
well,
nobody ever goes to the bathroom on television. In any show that's ever been done, nobody ever goes to the bathroom.
Well,
this is
you
not
see,
done.
on the Spaceship Enterprise, it was very easy because we did have phasers. And then you set them on disintegrate.
Yes. Aim carefully.
And and aim carefully. And we only had a few losses of personnel in training camp. That's the way it's done.
We aim to please, so please aim. Now, again, thanks to Paramount Pictures for helping us out. We have a portion of an episode called The Omega Glory, which ran during the second season, I believe, here on NBC. And here is how it was and how it still is.
Approaching planet Omega 4, sir. Object ahead. Another vessel in planet orbit, Captain.
Oh, wait a minute. What happened when they boarded and investigated?
Something happened. Something went wrong there.
It's funny. You watch 3-4 minutes of this, or what do we have, 2 minutes here, and I didn't want it to end all.
That's right. I wanted to tell you something, Tom. We were talking about the quality of this show a few minutes ago. It seems, too, that it had a certain magic about it that touched the hearts and the minds of the young people and people of all ages, that seemed to prod their minds to want to inquire further into the universe and science and philosophies and cultures. And this has reflected throughout all the universities in the United States. You know, kids are doing theses on Star Trek and that sort of thing. And to give you an example, while we were doing Star Trek, a thing that stands out in my mind particularly, a man brought his daughter to the set who was 15 years old, a deeply retarded child. And we occupied 2 sound stages. He didn't bring her directly onto the sound stage because she was tremendously excited about being there. And he explained to me that this girl had not uttered a sound in 15 years. And quite by accident, they flicked on Star Trek. And she began to make noises. And the father became very excited about it. Took her to a therapist. And she began to talk. So now, whatever it was that touched this child's mind is a very satisfying and worthwhile feeling. And our mail reflects that in all categories. People on the verge of suicide, I've received mail that have looked at this show, and their whole attitude about life seems to have changed.
Have any of you found that the overriding philosophies as expressed by the writing and the craftsmanship in Star Trek itself has become a great part of your own personal philosophy of life?
Well,
universality.
Well, I would hope that going in, whatever philosophies I might entertain or I might live by were relatively fixated, relatively a part of me before the show began. I wouldn't like to think that I was proselytized by a television series. I would hope that I have enough intellectual resource to have already formulated those kinds of philosophies for myself. I must say they are compatible with what I believe, very, very much so.
But did this show touch you in any way other than professionally?
I'll tell you how it touched me, and I think this is kind of insightful, if you'll bear with me a minute. The most extraordinary thing about the show for me is really the kind of ironic counterpoint that it has made in terms of my life pattern now and my lifestyle now. Here I am. I go to these Star Trek conventions, as we all do, and I'm quick to say that if it had been any other actor playing the same role, the same thing would have happened to them. But the adulation, the attention, the press, all of the positive things really do not reflect in any way my standing in the theatrical community. It is not for me. It is not as easy for me to accept this kind of attention, knowing that at the same time I have to produce 2 ID cards to cash my, you know, to get my groceries in Los Angeles. I'm saying that figuratively. But that to me is the most astounding thing, that the Star Trek phenomenon is the science fiction of my life. Because it has nothing to do with my position in Hollywood, in Los Angeles, with my career, anything like that. It's totally, if anything, it's diametrically opposed to where I am.
There's another interesting aspect to it. We are going through the pains of being in a hit series, a series that I would venture to say is the most popular series in the world. I mean that. And if
What's it on in this country? 140 stations in the United States,
158 countries,
and 115 in other countries. 115 stations
around
around the world.
115.
Yeah.
The mail comes from all over. Germany, England, it's the same there. It's just as hot and getting hotter all the time. It seems to be seething and multiplying. But we're going through the pains of doing a successful hit show without doing the show.
And also not getting paid for it.
No rerun money.
Oh, no.
We haven't received rerun money, I think, in what, 5 years?
No because rerun
we
money.
We were paid for in the first year's shows, we were paid up to 6 reruns. And the second and third year shows, we were paid up to 10 reruns. And we have not received any money for 5 years, so they must be up to the 35th or the 40th rerun, one or the other. But there's one thing that I would like to say that I think that is, I mean, I think all the actors, when they look within themselves and they look towards the future, is that one of the fabulous things about it, from my point of view anyway, is that here you are, still relatively young, and you are a member of a classic. And that is beautiful. Your great-grandchildren will still be seeing Star Trek. The shows will still be that good, you know, and they will last, and they will be saying...
But as he says, it's also a little scary knowing that you're the star of a hit show.
Of a ghost.
And it's a ghost.
That's true.
That's right.
Incidentally, I noticed in the film, it would not have helped to have a large stomach with the costumes that you were assigned to wear, huh?
No, that doesn't help at all. No.
No, it doesn't help. I hope they have different costumes for the feature.
Let me pause for these announcements, and we will continue here with the Star Trekkers in 2 minutes and 5 seconds. Thank you, Bill Wendell. What was it like when you knew that it wasn't going to last very much longer and that the series had been canceled by NBC? That's just got to have a terrible effect on your morale and your approach to it and everything.
You mean the third year, the end of that third year when we knew?
Right.
Oh, it was a very distressing.
Well, in the second year, wasn't there talk of it going off after the second year, too?
It was talk from the beginning.
In fact, if it was
it
such
was always in trouble.
If it is such a hit, why weren't the ratings better on the damn thing?
Well, I don't know. There are many schools of thought on that. I don't think Star Trek really ever had the proper time slot, for one thing.
Yeah. I think it should have been on at 7:30 at night and stayed there. Yeah, but, well, you better slip off.
But it was a very distressing thought, you know, because we knew that we were, when they put us in that 10 o'clock Friday night slot, we knew that was the graveyard slot, and we knew it was on its way out, and we felt all along that we were doing something rather special, that this was a show that should not go off the air, again reflected by our mail, because we were very low in the ratings, but we were breaking every fan mail record in the history of NBC. So the two don't add up. You know, the 1,200 homes that govern you is what puts Star Trek off the air. That's the way it has to be. But we were breaking all kinds of fan mail records. I was told that
we were very big in the 30 cities rating, but not in the nationwide.
Yeah.
In the nationals,
I'd like to suggest something terribly sacrilegious. I believe that, and I'm not privy to any special information, but I believe that the ratings probably did reflect accurately our popularity in terms of the network audience. I think that our followers were passionate, vociferous, and militant, and they were ambulatory. They were ready to go out and picket. They were ready to do anything they could. I think it represented a minority of the viewing public below which you can keep a show on the air. However, and that's the big thing, and that's why I feel safe in saying that. I happen to believe it, but I feel safe in saying it. I think in syndication, we now have the numbers that we would have needed to stay on the air at that time, because we've gone beyond the metropolitan kind of climate. People all over the country are watching the show. The Great Breadbasket, the Bible Belt. science fiction, something that I wasn't particularly familiar with before or was aware of, but science fiction is considered anti-religious, or has been. But with the continual repeating of the shows over and over again, we have picked up an audience all through the country that is diversified, that is not simply children, that is not simply college students, it is really the entire scope of this country.
What you're really saying, Walter, is that when a local station has that program in its vault, it can schedule it at the time it feels it will reach the most responsive audience to it, instead of simply taking it down the line from the television network when the gods of power in New York decide it's going to be on.
Right.
But also, when Walter talks about the Bible Belt, just about every Star Trek show was a great morality play. Also, there were beautiful things said on there, and there was lovely truths that were stated, and everyone worked together in a loving way. And all the characters worked.
I'm just sitting here wondering, now suppose that one of the networks put it back into production for prime time.
Not one, it would have to be NBC. They own the rights there.
All right, suppose NBC, which to level is not having one of the great rating years in its history, suppose they decided, hey, conventions all over the country, everything going on, let's put the thing back on and see what happens. Would it work, or would it destroy the myth and the legend?
I don't know. That's that old thing of, can you go home again, and it's the same. We have the gamble with the motion picture where we did 79 episodes. There's got to be one episode in that everybody's going to like, but when you come out with one shot on the movie, not everyone is maybe going to like the movie. But it would be a big question as to whether or not.
Wouldn't you think the movie, though, is almost a pretty well calculated risk? I mean, the audience is built in.
I would think that.
Yeah.
I think everybody believes that it's, as you say, that it's a foregone conclusion. The only problem is that if they decide, because it's a feature film as opposed to a television show, that they have to change the thrust of it in some way, make it monsters and huge battle scenes, something that will, that you can't get on television. You may distort and
transporting it to the big screen and then trying to make it bigger to fit.
Right. You may distort the entire feeling of the show. You may.
I think it needs a storyline, something on the order of the crew encountering Christ in space and finding out that Christ is actually Lucifer. Satan.
I just don't know if we're quite ready for that one yet.
Apparently we're not.
Apparently not.
I don't believe we are. Let me just pause here for a couple of minutes for our stations, and then we will have Mr. Harlan Ellison out, who wrote one of the most popular episodes in the history of Star Trek, and we'll be right back after these announcements. Joining us now, Mr. Harlan Ellison, who is no stranger to this audience. Mr. Ellison was on our all-night program. We did a show on science fiction writing with Harlan and Gene Roddenberry and others, including Ray Bradbury, out in Los Angeles a little over a year ago. And Harlan wrote what many people consider to be one of the finest episodes of Star Trek, a program called City on the Edge of Forever. It won a Hugo, which is the science fiction award that year, and also the best outstanding dramatic presentation of that season on television. Joining us also Al Schuster, who has been producing Star Trek conventions around the country ever since the Star Trek phenomenon resurfaced. Harlan, how are you, my friend? All right? Have we told any lies out here about the show or the effort that went into it?
Well, I'm getting...
You're always the keeper of truth?
Yeah, well, I know all these fellows, and they're truthful people, but I'm afraid I was developing diabetes from all the sweetness and light. That's all.
Well, we can be prepared for a little sour then, eh?
No. It wasn't all sweetness and light, but backstage things happen. There are arguments, are there not, huh?
There were those, yes. I didn't work for the show after I did my one segment.
Why not?
I felt that they had mucked it up badly. And it took, I think, 6 or 7 years before Gene Roddenberry and I even spoke to each other again after the show. The thing that always troubled me about the series was that there was always the feeling that they were presenting great moral messages, and to me they were always very lightweight. And anytime you tried to really deal with what Faulkner called the human heart in conflict with itself, either the network or the production people said, no, our characters wouldn't act that way. In other words, they always had to be heroes.
It's amazing how they know how characters would act. They know how hair should look, how ties should be tied, how teeth should be fixed. They know all those things in the offices. It's amazing.
The thing that really amazes me is what you call the Star Trek phenomena. I did a convention here in town just a week or so ago, and 30,000 people were there. Riots. Somebody hit Shatner with a pie. Pie kill. Yeah, somebody hired pie kill. Did you know about that?
Yes, I walked out on stage shortly after it happened.
Al, what goes on at these things? What do you do? Do you show the films or?
Certainly, that's just part of it. The actors, these fellows all here, Harlan, come out and speak, come out and do their shtick, whatever it is. There are several other aspects to the convention. There's a large dealer's room. All sorts of things are sold. This medallion, tribbles. Like
yeah,
those.
What are these? Tell what these are. I don't remember.
Hairballs.
Yes.
Fuzzballs. They're very similar, very akin to the pet rocks that are floating around now. There's a big fad. But tribbles were the creation of one episode of Star Trek.
And David Gerald, who created it.
David Gerald, obviously, the man who wrote it.
Tribbles actually gave birth to the pet rocks. There are several tribbles in existence that have been known to give birth to a... help me out, will you please?
Come on, you got yourself...
Pet rock is a tribble with hardening of the arteries.
Thank you.
We didn't understand that.
Now, when you fellas come out at the convention, do you make a talk or do you have set routines? Like, what do you do?
Come out, we make a talk, and then we go into a question and answer thing. That seems to be what they want to do. They want to talk to you. They want to communicate and ask you questions about yourself, about the show, experiences on shows, that sort of thing.
What do you think would happen if it came back on primetime?
I think it would do very nicely indeed.
Yeah, look at what is it, Space 1999, that's in syndication? They're going for a second year now.
And it's a Lox, and it's doing well enough. Clearly, the public is ready for science fiction. They want something good. Well, I'm sorry. What am I going to do? Am I going to lie to you? You bring me on, you know I'll tell you the truth.
I know you'll tell me the truth, but is it highly possible, in the truth as you perceive it, sir, that television is simply not equipped to deal with what you want to put on a 19-inch diagonal tube?
No, the truth of the matter is that television is the best medium that has ever been devised, including the print medium, for dealing with fantasy. The problem lies in the fact that the moguls, none of whom are creators, they're all, you know, failed agents or failed CPAs or failed, you know, whatever they are.
Ex-booth announcers,
massage parlor guys. Who the hell knows what they do for a living when they're not, you know, messing our lives up? They don't understand.
What'd you used to do? WILXTV Lansing.
Right.
Hey, great, couldn't do it. Now I'm in here planning your life for you. Yeah.
They see machinery. They see machinery, and they think that's what science fiction is, and it isn't. It's people, and it's the effect of the future on people. They cannot get it through their heads. This year, all three of the major networks are looking, in quotes, for a science fiction project. And when one is offered to them, they say, well, no, we don't understand that. I don't explain it to you. And I had a meeting.
If you have to do that, you're lost.
Oh, yeah, the instant you explain it. Yeah, right. It's
Right
like
off the
telling
bat.
them the plot of Moby Dick. Well, it's a nut chasing a big fish, you know? Listen, I'm about to talk myself out of a job. The movie, the Star Trek movie, right? There have been 967 writers called in on this project. Last word, there was no script. They got a director, they got a start date, no script. I think they're going to stand there and whistle. Who knows? Roddenberry called me in. He says, you know, he was really desperate to call me in. And he said, let's try.
Like you said, you're about to blow a job, huh? Right?
Look, no, Gene knows what I'm going to say. Gene's cool. We came in and we thought up an idea. Paramount keeps saying to them, no matter what plot they offer them, it's not big enough. It's not big enough, right?
That's what he was saying.
Right, except that one of them we destroyed the universe. We thought that was big enough. No, it wasn't big enough. So...
It's like on the news, world ends, details at 10. You know?
How about if we go into space and find Jim Audrey and find out he's God, right? So, anyhow, I have a meeting with a guy from Paramount, the guy who's the liaison. He's the interface between the great powers on the
You know why I held you till after 1:30? You know, a few people go to bed, like Jim Aubrey might be gone now. You know, I don't want you to lose it all when you're out here.
Listen, I must have a suicide complex. I wouldn't be in Hollywood to begin with. We come in for we get a story. It's a super duper story. Gene and I work it out, and it's all solid. So in comes this tum-tum from the head office, and he's gonna listen to it. We explain the whole thing to him. It's complex, but it's fascinating. It goes back to the dawn of time and a parallel species that grew up with humankind and so on and so on, and the whole thing. When you get all done, he sits there and he goes, He says, well, you know, I was reading Von Daniken, and, you know, the Mayan calendar is the same as our calendar. Why don't you put in some Mayans? We said, Mayans? He says, yeah, why don't you put in the Mayans? That's terrific. And Gene and I kind of look at each other like, We tried to explain to him there were no Mayans at the dawn of time. He didn't understand that. So he said, well, I'll tell it to show me whatever his name was up in the tower, and that was that. So
And we'll get back to you.
yeah, and they never do.
Yeah. Oh, no.
No.
Listen, we're going to have to fire you. Oh, yeah? When am I through? Well, we'll get back to you.
It's like the Red Queen's race. You got to run as fast as you can to stay in the same place.
What was your first convention like? Was it a smash?
Certainly.
The very first one?
Yes, surprisingly so. We anticipated probably 400 or 500 people would show up. Almost 3,000 showed up. Statler Hilton Hotel in 71. I'm sorry, 72, January 9th.
And how many of these do you run a year?
Well, in the past I was only running one, but in the last few months I've put on 3 conventions. One in August in Philadelphia, one over January 1st weekend in Washington, D.C., where incidentally I had a transporter mechanism brought in. It's the first time it's ever been shown at a Star Trek convention. It worked very similar to the transporter effect shown on television. It came out of Chicago Creative Presentations. It's
What does it do?
it makes people appear.
It's magic.
Yeah, and it materializes.
Right. You mean
Lights
They
and mirrors.
materialize on stage.
Oh, I see. I see.
Literally materialize on
I
stage.
mean, people don't disintegrate and go across the room and...
Well, it looks like it.
It looks suspiciously like it.
If they had the
that's what
sparkles
happens.
and everything else there, it would look like it. Absolutely.
Can I put a couple of network heads in that thing? Make it
We didn't lose anybody.
There's going to be another convention. Now, that's, what, 3 in a row?
3 in a row
The
in
Commodore
New York.
Hotel.
Do you fellas who were in the series, do you like going to these conventions? Truthfully. Or sometimes you say to yourself, I just don't want to go to another convention.
I feel that way.
It's getting that way.
I know you do.
Yeah.
I know you do. I have the feeling that you feel that way.
I haven't gone to too many of them, and I'm getting a little tired of it.
I got a
I'm
quote for
lazy
you.
anyhow, so...
Hold the quote for a couple of minutes. I got these little announcements. Last break we have, so we'll get them out of the way, and we'll be right back and hear a quote from Harlan
I
Ellison.
want equal time.
Wait till tonight.
Yeah, let's not go into that.
No, I shouldn't. I would never mention that.
No, of course not. Of course not.
No.
You know, why louse up a recip, you know what I mean?
No, I'm cool.
Okay, now here's the quote.
All right, this is a quote from a book.
Incidentally, is the movie script, you have no script, you said. That's not progressed one iota
As far
beyond.
as I know, as of yesterday afternoon, there was no script. Gene was, I understand, working with other writers. Who they may be, God only knows. Whether there'll be a script or not, I don't know.
But you're off the movie.
As far as they haven't gotten back to me.
But Tom, got a note from Gene Roddenberry, which I think is interesting. He said, we have a starting date, July 15th, but we don't have a script. But he said, what the hell? He said, there are a lot of people that have scripts that don't have a starting date.
Beautiful. Did he mention a year?
No, he didn't mention
a year.
Well, we'll get back to you.
Okay. Quote.
Okay, this is from a book review of a paperback that came out that was marketed as, if you like Star Trek, you'll love this book, okay? And the critic, John Kurlovich, said, the ever-spreading influence of that, he says, still there remains the fascinating question of why the author of this book didn't latch on to a better model for a novel than Star Trek. The ever-spreading influence of that show is now an undeniable fact. A good deal has been said and written about this phenomenon, but many seem to agree that the program's advocates, whatever else they are appallingly indiscriminate. What can one make of a mentality that not only condones mediocrity, but believes it to be something good, something decidedly worth emulating? Now that is the most dead-on quote I've ever heard about the Star Trek phenomenon. As good as the show may have been, at best, all it is really is a television show. There are no great conventions of 30,000 people going to discuss Proust's Remembrance of Things Past. There are not people dashing in to pay homage to Ralph Nader, the Ralph Nader convention. This was plain and simple, is a kind of hero worship that is on the same plane with the Beatles, on the same plane with, Elvis Presley or Jacqueline Suzanne books. It's better for TV, but what we're talking about again is that great swamp of television drama, which at best never touches, even the middle range of what is done in other medium. Ta-da!
Okay, but I think you need a frame of reference. Now, you cannot translate or cannot transcribe the quality of a novel and compare that to the quality of a television show.
Why not?
Because they're apples and oranges. That's why. You can't. We know that from our personal experience. I'm doing that science fiction seminar. I took some of the finest novelists, fantasy novelists, and had professional actors read from them, and it was dull. because it doesn't translate. It's not theater. It's not necessarily theater.
Well, but that wasn't drama. That was a straight reading. What we're talking about is the difference between the best of the Star Trek episodes and any one segment of, say, Rich Man, Poor Man, which is running on another network. And clearly you can take, you know, meaningful, gut-level material and translate it to a television medium so that you don't insult the viewers.
Yes, but now here's something that's quite interesting. You mentioned Rich Man, Poor Man, which is running on ABC. Now, Irwin Shaw's book was a wonderful book to read, I thought. I enjoyed the book, all right? I read an account of that show in one of the news magazines this week where they say that it's poorly written, poorly presented, and that it really isn't worth all the trouble of watching.
I heard the same thing.
Yeah, Newsweek or Time had a little one of their little quick shots.
All I can say is I watched it, and I was fascinated.
I didn't read the book. I watched it. I thought, great.
Yeah,
I thought it was great.
You know?
But there's always somebody who will take what's on television, and we're all guilty of it. Like this guy who wrote this here, and what you're saying tonight is going to say, well, it's no good. Yet here's something that you think is of value, but I can give you 4 opinions where they say, well, it's of no value.
No, he didn't say it's bad. What he said is it's mediocre. And that, I think, is the crime. Bad, I can understand. I mean, I can even understand someone making a motion picture where they try to do something. I mean, God knows how many of those, where they strive to do something and they fail dismally, but they tried. The best that anything tries to do on Star Trek or anything else on television is to hit that median, which is where they failed because they tried to be a little bit better and they didn't get the Bible Belt. Instead of conscientiously educating a television audience throughout the nation to want better things, they give them one more cop show. Jigsaw John went on the other night. There's another cop show. The Cop and the Kid, that'll last 15 minutes, you know.
What you're doing when you talk about the cop shows is you're praising Star Trek, really, because Star Trek was much more than any cop show you ever want to see.
No, it was a cop show.
Oh,
Star Trek was a cop show, too.
No.
Sure, it was spacemen acting like cops.
No, it wasn't.
Didn't you? Didn't you go through the galaxy and straighten things out?
There were a few things.
Come on, you're 40.
Really,
Fess up. Come on,
really,
Jimmy.
when
Didn't
it
you
comes
fight
down to
evil?
the sum total, you know, you can't knock it that way.
I think that every episode of Star Trek did something that they preached in every episode they didn't do, and that was stress violence. I think that there was violence in every episode of Star Trek, as much as they preached that there wasn't, or that man had overcome his violent aspect. There was violence in every episode.
Yeah, but generally it wasn't man. It was some android or some
It was one of those
galactic
terrible
monster.
little green people with, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think that...
Isn't that fascinating? Isn't that fascinating? Anytime they kill someone off, it was always a member of a third world race, right? Go ahead, shoot him. Donnie's green. What does it matter?
We didn't shoot him, we stunned him.
Vulcan nerve pinched him.
Where is that thing that you had out here, that gun?
There you are.
No. You demonstrate what it does, because I don't understand the technology.
That's all right. That's all right.
Go ahead. Go crazy with the gun.
Now, let me see here. We have... That's stun. Can you see that?
All right,
Stun
stunning.
force?
Now twist the dial. Right.
That sounds like a tribble. I don't know what...
Point it.
Now, these are for sale at the conventions, huh?
Well, this is a prototype, I believe, that was made by the people at the Federation Trading Post, which is a store devoted entirely to Star Trek stuff.
There's one east and one west.
That's right. You really hated it, didn't you?
No, man, listen.
You wrote your one episode.
No, you know what
huh?
I hate? You know what I hate? Honest to God, I hate...
Reverence for things that don't deserve them. I know you hate that.
Yeah, but I also hate the fact that it's the exploitation of the gullible. I mean, you see the things that these kids buy when they go to these conventions. They spend hundreds of thousands of dollars because it's Star Trek affiliated. You know, I mean, if they want to watch the show, Dynamite, let them watch. Better that than they should be out in the street, you know, stealing hubcaps. But they're being really exploited. $12 a day to go and listen to, you know, James Doohan explain the ethical structure of the universe. I mean, this is a bit of exploitation. I thought it was worth it.
Yet you went to one.
I went for money, man.
He goes for all of
I went for money. They pay me a staggering sum of money, but I don't do a Star Trek gig. I get up and I read my stories. Anybody wants to come and listen to me read my stories? Dynamite, but I do the same thing I would do anyplace else.
Yeah, and they all get up and leave, right?
Well, that's true. That's true.
Brings the audience to their feet as they head for the exits.
I have a limited audience, but they're an intelligent one.
Yeah.
I'd like to... Tom, can I just say one thing?
Yeah, what do we got left? 45 show? Okay, 30 seconds.
Okay. I think you've got to consider Star Trek not as the ultimate in terms of in terms of quality television or science fiction on television, but as a departure point. I think it's, without question, the best episodic science fiction that has ever been on television. That doesn't mean that it's the best television that there ever was, but certainly if you consider it as a departure, as a place, as a jumping-off place, then I think you have a very positive attitude about what's going to happen with television and the quality of television. Star Trek broke new roads. I
8 years ago, and nothing's happened since, Walter.
We're coming back.
Gents,
we're coming back, baby.
I'm out of time. We had another piece of film to show, and I never got it on because we were having such a wonderful time listening to Harlan Ellison tell us that it was all... Sometime you're coming on here, and we're going to tell the stories you've been through in the television industry, and we're going to name the names.
You're on.
Okay, so
You're
are
on.
you. We'll tape it right after we get finished tonight. We'll be right back after these announcements, and I hope all of you will stay here. And that concludes our Star Trek look back to the 4th of February, 1976 this year, and also concludes the encore presentations, the reruns that we've been putting on during our vacation time. And now here is tonight's late news from the People team. On Monday, a very interesting story. I hope so. When Bert Ross was part-time mayor of Fort Lee, New Jersey, which is what, just across the Hudson River from New York, he was offered a $500,000 bribe. He not only turned down this bribe, but allowed himself to be wired